and I was really taken by surprise. I was just sharing this thought with the principal of the college, and I was saying like, but when I entered the gate, it was very deceptive. Deceptive in the sense that it was just a small entrance and a few buildings that I could see. But then, as I drove in, I was in for a big surprise. Never imagined really in the heart of the city that you have such a big area and such a well-established school and a college. And just like it had opened up for me and also for my scholars who have come along with me, I just have a feeling that this college, this institution, it has really that welcoming kind of an appeal. And thank you so much for that. Especially when we walked in, we were welcomed by one gentleman who said like, come on, take me inside. I didn't know him, but it just brought us inside. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, teachers, principal, faculty members, and students friend. I sincerely hope that I will not bore you today. The reason being that, oh, by the way, before I go into that, how many history students are here? Can you please raise your hands? Wow, that's pretty impressive. Thank you. Are you doing history by choice or was it by default? A straight question. Did you really want to take up history or is it because there was no choice? Nehru did not give you a chance. The subject combination was such that you have to take up history. Anyone like that here? No? Yeah. You know why? I keep on asking this question to my students at the university level. And I'm not surprised when you get the results. The answers, I mean. Because many of them who have joined the department, it's because they had no other alternative. They wanted to move into English, they wanted to move to sociology, they wanted to go into economics, and because there was no other alternative, but then the last resort, let us go into history. And they're crowding into history. I hope that's not the case here in this college. But then, the point is, why am I saying this early in the morning? For the very simple reason, we have been drawing our own statistics a bit on this. And we have noticed that not many students are really opting for this subject. Except for our three very die-hard friends here, doing their PhD in history. Trained historians now. Except for them. I think a large number of our student friends, they are not really interested in history anymore. Well, there are weighty reasons for this. And one of the important reasons as to why students, they don't like to do history anymore is because students, they have no time really to go back into the past. Students are so futuristic that they are so impressed by the today and the tomorrow that they would prefer to dwell themselves in what's going to happen next. Because that what's going to happen next is very, very interesting. Rather than worry yourself as to what had really happened before. So, somewhere down the line, somebody said that history indeed is a very interesting subject. People who are doing history, they find it to be very interesting. For the very simple reason that history is boring. I hope, sincerely hope, that I'm not going to bore you today. Okay? Should you feel bored, anywhere down the line, raise your hands and tell me to stop. I will gladly do so. So if you're in for some kind of a storytelling, I'm here today. I'm going to be your storyteller. Okay? That's not the right time really for telling a story, but then I'm giving a job to perform, so I'm here. Okay, ma'am, with your permission, let me start. Again, thank you so much for having me. The topic which I thought, which will be kind of relevant for the students who are attending this course, and also for those who are not really taking history, is to understand as to how the tribes, different hill tribes, they reacted to the British. what really happened when these two came into contact with one another. Let me draw your attention to the time when the different hill tribes, I'm not going to name them, I'll just use this term in a general sense, that when the different hill tribes of Northeast India came into contact with the British. What happened next? Apart from the political and also the administrative mechanism that was put in place, it was noticed that there was this question on the dissemination of ideas, especially the basic principles of modernity, and also as to the manner how the people of this region have adapted and accommodated to these ideas from the West. I would like to draw your attention to that aspect, the dissemination of ideas, how these ideas from the West started to come into this part of the world, and how the different tribes, they have adjusted, adapted to these ideas which were coming from the West. Why am I stressing on this? For the very simple reason that it was very alien to the people, very alien to the culture of people, the different tribes over there. Interestingly, it did not remain confined just to the flow of ideas. Here we notice that there was this multiple cultural encounters that was taking place. And the different groups that were there in the Northeast came to even collaborate with the British. And it was here that we noticed that a large number of indigenous people, they started to work also for the British. And there were also a large number of people, indigenous people, who were resenting, they showed their resentment to what was really going on. But then as part of that civilizational discourse, India appeared to the colonial rulers as, I quote, a strange country. To the Westerners, India presented a strange country. Can you imagine what was the Northeast? What was the Northeast like to them? If the whole of India presented a strange country, think about the Northeast. How did they really look at us? To them, it was a very unfamiliar world that they have come to. To many of the British officers and people who had come over, India was a country, I quote again, these are not my words, bestial in habits and customs, and they took upon themselves the mission to civilize the people. They are no better than beasts. Again, I said, not my words. These are the words in colonial writings. So therefore, they took upon themselves this grand idea to civilize the people. And so therefore, the concept of, I quote again, white man's burden. Let me not go into that, okay? White man's burden is a concept that's been used by them, that they had to take up this responsibility of coming over to India and also to the Northeast, and also to help the people grow or change their way of life and so on and so forth. Now this concept of white man's burden became a powerful tool and started operating under the broad vision of westernizing not just the people here in Northeast, but the rest of India. So from the ideological perspective, westernization served as a potent instrument of colonial domination. So this domination, which took place gradually in India, westernization served to be one very important instrument. Without really wasting time much on what had really happened in the rest of the country, let me now focus on the case of the Northeast. We all know that there was one very important event that had taken place which brought the British closer to the Northeast. There was a war which was fought. Any of us students, teachers, please don't help me. Any of us students, can you just relate to that a bit, please? There was a war which was fought between the British and another group, a country, which brought the British closer to the Northeast, and for us, in many ways, we consider it to be a watershed as far as the relationship between the British and the people of Northeast were concerned. What was that? You're ready with the answer? Very good. Thank you so much. You're doing which semester now? Very good. The Anglo-Burmese War, 1824, concluded by the Treaty of Yagatabo, 1826. And so therefore, from that time onwards, it was noted that the interaction between the British and the people of Northeast cannot be really avoided. Therefore, we always considered it in our writings and our discussions that it was a watershed in the history of the Northeast. The British came into contact with the Ahoms. There were a number of tribes when they came into contact, especially around the Brahmaputra Valley. And mainly this contact was through economic activities. Now the desire on the part of the English to extend their trading activities with other regions of Asia and to look for better opportunities drove them further into the interiors of the Northeast. So it was not just the Anglo-Burmese War now. They saw the potential of having a very good trade relations with other parts of this region. So therefore, they decided to move further into the Northeast. They wanted to expand the trade, and more importantly, there was this urgent need on their part to defend their frontier. Which frontier are we talking about here? We're referring to the Bengal Presidency. Okay? Because if the Burmese would have won the war, Bengal would be under threat, and so therefore they cannot afford to do all that. Bengal was so precious to them, they cannot afford to think that they're going to lose Bengal. What really happened next? If you try to look into that kind of geopolitics that was taking place at that time, it is not really difficult to understand as to what's really happening now, the present. This is where the relevance of history becomes important to us. If history was boring, as I said earlier, okay, this is where you can relate to the past and then bring it to the present to understand a bit of the future, if possible. Now, Northeast, that time, have to be created as a buffer zone. Does it ring any bell now? Where are we placed? If you look to the foreign policies of the country, what's going on? Okay, how do we look at Northeast really? How do we really look at this place? From Delhi, how do we really look at this place? Well, if you find it difficult to understand this a bit, try and also look into as to what's really happening in this beautiful city of Shillong. Just look around you. Shillong is surrounded by what, really? Nowadays, we don't really talk about the hills or the trees anymore. Shillong is surrounded by what? Anyway, I'm not supposed to ask questions, right? I'm supposed to give you the answers also straight away. Look around you. Just look around you. Take a drive. Okay? The outskirts of Shillong, what do you see? You always see a man in uniform. The garrisons. Look into it. Why do we really need so many of this military personnel? With their regiments, with their cantons, and many more. To guard Shillong, really? Think about it. Headquarters of the Eastern Command is right here. Why? Look into the strategic location of this place. Then extend this to Assam, Tezpur, and other areas. Okay? How this entire region is being fortified. For what purpose? For what purpose? India needs to defend her frontiers. There's always this external threat that can come from outside. But in the process, get ready for many things also. Should there be a conflict, then you can very well understand what's going to happen. Okay, God forbid. But then, what I'm trying to draw your attention is this, that right from the time the British have realized that Northeast have to be treated in a different way, have to be treated as a buffer zone against any kind of attacks, especially that would put the Bengal presidency under unwanted risk. So therefore there was a need to consolidate certain very important areas, especially after 1824. Initially, they were not interested to even annex Assam. Now for those of you doing history in Northeast India, you'll be knowing that. Not interested. Why? Because they have too many things to handle at that point of time. Rather than come over to Assam without really knowing what the place would really have to offer, it was only much later that they realized that Assam has a lot of things. Starting right from trade, starting right from the discovery of tea, the discovery of the oil fields, so on and so forth. Now, for them, they were all here ready to do business, to do trade, and maximizing their profit was their prime concern. And they also realized that Assam can realize a lot of revenues where the cost of administration can be worked out from the revenues that they're going to collect also. Well, that was in contrast to what the other tribes can offer. In the case of the other neighboring tribes, apart from a few, let me just point out, like say the case of the Kachar kingdom, the Tripura kingdom, the Manipuri kingdom, the Jaintia kingdom. Apart from this, the British were hesitant of even thinking of venturing into other parts of the Northeast because they realized that it would be very difficult for them to raise the revenues to meet even the cost of the administration. They cannot imagine that the cost of administration will come from somewhere and people have to be governed by somebody else spending that kind of money. So therefore, in that sense, they had no intention really of bringing this region under their control in the initial phases. But then, things were changing very fast. It started to change because they realized that the kind of political strife that was taking place in the Northeast and the kind of problem that the different tribes they were creating for the British subjects in the plains called for their intervention. They needed to intervene, to stop the raids, to stop many of the attacks that was taking place in the plain areas. Now a question can be asked here. You don't answer, okay? I'm just throwing to you, but don't answer. I'll answer it for you. A question can be asked here as to why the people from the hills, they were raiding the plains. Almost it had become a kind of a habit for them that every time, okay, they would go down the plains and loot, plunder, and then go back to the hills. The simple reason is this, that as population was growing in the hills, there was not enough really of something, let me put it this way, like be it in the form of cultivation, which was primarily June, or be it in the form of the barter trade which they were having. There was not enough really to supplement the needs of the growing population in many of the areas of the hill tribes. So therefore, there was this need to go down to the plains, and especially during the time of harvest, to go raid those areas, then take away all the crops, and then go back to the hills. But then by this time, let me also tell you this, that many of these plain areas, they were already under the control of the British. So therefore, those people residing there, they were British subjects. And it was mandatory for the British to protect their subjects at any cost. These were some of the considerations which necessitated the coming of the British or to penetrate further into the northeast. Here I would like to refer to you about the statement that was made by David Scott. This is with regard to Assam. David Scott said like this, that the intention of the British was not marked by their thirst of conquest, but instead they were forced, look to that, they were forced to enter into Assam in order to protect and defend their own territory. Statement made by David Scott himself, who was the agent to the Governor General, Northeast Frontier. This was his statement, that they have no interest whatsoever to come, nor to annex any part of the Northeast, Assam for that matter. But they had to do so. Rather, they were forced, look to that, they were forced to enter into Assam in order to protect and defend their own territory. As I said earlier, this kind of a policy was not to remain for long. Their desire for trade and to monopolize their profits, coupled with the need to subjugate the other tribes in the region, forced them to intervene. So there was this gradual process that took place. Let me cut the story short, okay? Because there will be endless talk on that aspect. Let me draw your attention to something else. Apart from politics, there was also other economic considerations which compelled the British to change the stand with regard to the case of the Northeast. I'm being very specific here. The prospect in exploring the mineral resources, cotton, rubber, tea, and many other products from the region attracted the attention of the colonial government all the more. Now, right from that time, steps were also taken up by the administration to give to the hill people a paternal government, which would allow them to exercise their own knowledge in the management of themselves with just the amount of control from above. They did not really want to interfere in internal administration, but what they did was they wanted just a bit of control from the top and allowing the chiefs or the other rulers, the local rulers, to carry on with their administration. This was a new encounter for many of the hill tribes, and for the traditional chiefs, they were allowed to continue with their administration, but under the new dispensation. It was a very interesting development, where the chiefs now acted as new intermediaries, and their relationship with the British also took the form of interlocutors. The chiefs now became closer to the administrative machinery of the British. What I'm trying to tell you here is this, is now this changing scenario that was taking place. And in that changing scenario, we now see that there were a good number of local people themselves who have benefited from that kind of an interaction, especially at the elite level. What about the common people? As far as the common people were concerned, the vast majority of them, they remain untouched. Many of them did not really even realize that there was this another authority that was sitting on top of them, giving directions. Because for many years, that interaction between local people, the vast majority, and the British never really took that shape. There was this kind of opinions that was drawn by the British officers with regard to the people here in the Northeast. I will refer to David Scott, Major Jenkins, James Johnston, and also others who have been working in this region for many years. They would refer to these tribes in the Northeast as being backward and uncivilized. Their views were shaped by the kind of writings that was appearing at the time, and the kind of subconscious prejudice that they were having, which is also being characterized by a concealed form of racism many of these expression, the kind of prejudices which they were having towards the people, all these would speak much as to how they were looking at this tribe. Here, you can look into the statement that was made by William Carey himself. You can look into the statement made by John Ruskin, William Jones, James Mill, Henry Maine. So many of these people, they were very influential people. And their writings did make a very strong impact. Because many of these officers who were to come to India, work here as administrators, they were first of all trained in England, and they were reading the books of these very famous people. So before they come over to this part of the world, okay, India and the Northeast, they have already drawn their conclusion about the people with whom they're going to interact. So what was this kind of, what are these kind of writings really? Let me not go into them, okay? Because it will make you very, very sad. You'll not like it, okay? You'll not like it. Honestly, you'll not like it. Because if I read those statements as to how they look, how they think, and what they had to say about us, then you will not like it. Let me avoid that. Now, whether it was ignorance or prejudice that determined such views of these scholars, such analysis that was made by them were not uninfluential. And it also exemplified the Eurocentric undercurrent that pervaded most British and European scholarship at that time. To this effect, a colonial paradigm had to be put in place to be internalized by the people. This was something which they have realized that they have to do it very fast. What did they do? What was this colonial paradigm? They wanted it to be this way. The negative aspects of all the tribal life, traditions, practices need to be highlighted. Look into that strategy that was worked out by them. I'll repeat that again. The negative aspects of the tribal life, their traditions, their practices have to be highlighted and also at the same time to make obscure the positive ideals, whatever that was good, whatever that was positive, whatever that was pleasant about the tribal people. Hush, hush. Don't even mention it. Keep on talking about all the other negative things. The tribal people ought to be told over and over again that they are a deeply conservative and fatalist people. To be told, you and me, we are to be told again and again that we are deeply conservative, fatalist, people who are predisposed to irrational, superstitious beliefs and practices. The native tribes have to be told again that the British people, the white men, they were the harbingers of all the good things that the world can offer. So therefore, the native tribes, they will have to accept the changes that is to be brought about by colonial rule. What does it mean? It would mean like this, to put it in very simple terms. You will have to accept us because we are here to teach you a lot of things that you don't know. That you are so backward, you are placed in such a pathetic condition that we are here to bring civilization to you. And according to them, the hill communities would be better off with the spread of modern education and Christianity. What was really the objective behind this? The British were very smart. That's why they have ruled half the world, right? You used to hear the statement when they say that in the British Empire, the sun never sets in the British Empire because if it's nighttime somewhere else, it will be again morning somewhere else. That huge. Can you imagine a very small nation, a very small country ruling such a huge part of the globe? They have realized many things, and perhaps this is something that we have to learn also from them. Now they have realized that to go and fight with the other native tribes will just be a waste of time, waste of resources. Because these native tribes, they would not dare to come and fight face to face. They have seen far greater battles. They have fought wars. History is full of blood. We know that, right? And that's why we don't understand why we really love so much of bloodshed also. Students of history, teachers of history, we deal only with blood, and wars all the time. Thank God today, the Department of History from Nehru, we've decided to do away with all this kind of studies and to move more towards culture, traditions, and ecology, and the ideological aspects, and many more. But then there was a time I was brought up in that kind of a situation where I have to remember so many wars, so many dates, so many names of people, rulers, kings, and not forgetting even elephants also. How many elephants were used in the battlefield? How many horses died? All that kind of stuff. Makes you think, was it really necessary? But then that was the time when history was written like that. They realized that there was no point to fight really with the tribal people. Why? Because they would not fight face to face. What was the fighting techniques? That kind of methodology of warfare was totally different. Hit and run. To the British, it was a very cowardly kind of an act to fight. To them, to fight means come face to face and fight. But then, that's not in the nature of the tribal people. For them, the guerrilla method of warfare, which we can see till today, is still very strong. Hit and run, always. They will come, they will work up the strategy, attack, then disappear. But that's something which the British have realized that they will not be able to handle. Why? Very simple. They don't even know the terrains. And the local people make use of many other things. Forget about bows and arrows. They'll use the most common kind of a item that is available in plenty. What's that? What's that? Roll down the stones. Roll down the rocks. Okay, just be there, pile them up on top of the hill, and as the British soldiers will be coming, forget it. Just roll down the stones, let the stones do the work. Okay? And they will just disappear. So these were the kind of strategies which the local people they have worked out, which the British they realized that it was very difficult to handle. So what should they do next? Strategy. Bring in another group of people. Another group of people who will not fight with guns, bows or arrows, cannons, mortars, artilleries. No. They will be able to convince the people through their words. Who are they? Who are they? Here they decided that bring another set of people to tame the natives, the missionaries. They will just come, talk to the people, tell them they have a different way of going about it. They are gifted in their own ways because they have a call to take up that kind of profession. And so therefore we notice that slowly with time, though initially the government in Bengal was not in favor of using any of this group to come over to the Northeast, nor to introduce Christianity into the Northeast, but the situation was such that slowly with time they came along to the Northeast. And when they came, we saw that there was a gradual change, where people who were so violent at one point of time, who were ready to take out their swords and machete and other things to go fight and kill, now they have been subdued through the word. Through the word, they were now subdued. And so therefore it was very easy now to tackle the warring nature of the tribes. Another reason as to why Christianity made a very significant headway into the Northeast was because they argued that the hill tribes were different from the rest of the other people that you see in other parts of the country. Hinduism, for that matter, had never really made a strong impact. Islam, for that matter, also never really had made a strong impact. So therefore, it was a very fertile ground for Christianity to spread here in the Northeast. And yes, with the coming of the missionaries, we also noticed that the ways of life of the people had also improved. Let us not miss out on that. They were able to improve agricultural practices. They introduced mechanical art, different forms of horticulture ways of going about plantation. And slowly with time we noticed that we have the Serampore Baptist Mission, the American Baptist Mission, the Roman Catholics, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Welsh Mission, spread throughout different parts of the Northeast. And this thing went on to the Naga Hills, the Lushai Hills, to Garo Hills, Khasi Hills, Jaintias, and so on and so forth. Okay, let me not bore you with all that. Interestingly, in the case of the Lushai Hills, which we call Mizoram today, apart from the Welsh, the Baptists, the Roman Catholics, we also have the Salvation Army. They made their footings there. Very quickly, let me draw your attention. By the way, how much time have we been doing? As I said earlier, if you're bored, just raise your hands, I'll stop, okay? I know you'll not do that. I have to stop it by myself. Okay. I'm coming to an end now, very quickly. The consequences of all this interaction, it was this, that it led to the pacification of the hills. Slowly, bit by bit, the hills were pacified, and the missionaries, for that matter, they played a very important role in making the people to accept colonial rule. Did I say that? I said something just now which can be very controversial to so many of you. I'll repeat that again, but I've said it. I'll repeat it again. It led to the pacification of the hills, and they played a very important role in making the people to accept colonial rule. What do we see here? A nexus that was there between missionary activities and colonial rule. The consequences of all this kind of interaction you can very well see with the spread of education. And the list would go on and on. I have an intention to refer to that. But then, there's one area where I'd like to draw your attention. It was noticed that the plasticity of reasons, I'm using concepts now, the plasticity of reasons on the part of the indigenous people was clearly seen when they failed to comprehend the manner in which they were tutored, and their mind being colonized through colonial ideologues. The native mind was given a new turn, and the people failed to appreciate the original native model and sought to improve or to improvise their institution based on the ideas that were offered to them by both the administrators and the missionaries. The establishment of educational institutions went a long way in fulfilling the objectives of the colonial administrators to tame the natives, especially in those cases where treaties, punitive expeditions, and material concessions have failed. Many of the Western educated and converts, in particular, stopped to regard the English as their enemies. They stopped to regard the English as their usurpers of their rights and liberties. and to draw themselves closer to the new regime and looked upon them as friends and patrons who can bring change in their society as a whole. Much of this kind of psychological indoctrination of the native mind took place in the educational institutions. I am referring now to a different kind of an attack, and this attack was here. Psychological indoctrination. It happened right from the primary level. To tell the people that we are here for you, and there's no reasons whatsoever that you should think that you should fight with us. No, you should think that you should drive us out or rebel against us. So therefore, what you should do next is accept us, because it will be for your own good if you are. What really happened? Interestingly, so many fell for that. That's why I said the plasticity of reasons. It is a concept. We cannot really use our own cognitive skills to understand as to what's really happening with us. Today, can we apply it to the present? I leave that to you. But friends, let me tell you one more thing. That this kind of situation that was raging that time was not ready to go without some kind of repercussions. What followed next was a series of resistance movement that took place here in the Northeast. The people very soon realized that they need to do something for themselves, or else they're going to lose everything. It's okay, friends. It rains. We really needed it. Okay? I, for one, am telling you, we really wanted it to rain, but then it's not been happening for some time. I wish we really have a good shower. How did this happen? Resistance came about when people started to understand the kind of distortions that was taking place. And so therefore, they started to mobilize themselves. And on seeing their own culture, religion, practices being trampled upon, they decided to take up arms. And between 1770 onwards, right from that time down to the beginning of the 20th century, 1770, the last part of the 18th century, down to the beginning of the 20th century, we saw the sporadic rise of this kind of resentment against colonial rule. And believe me, some of them were having anti-Christian overtones. Anti-Christian overtones. If you have not heard this, hear it from me. Because this attack was not directed only to the British authorities, nor to the missionaries, but the attack was also directed against those people who had embraced Christianity, the converts. Should I stop? Should I stop? No? Thank you so much. I have not finished. I've just done with the first part. The second part is still left. Give me another 5 minutes, okay? Very quickly. I don't know how many of you are really comfortable with the history of the Jaintias. But if I should ask a question here, what according to you was the first war which the Jaintias they fought against the British? Have you started this paper with them, with the students? If I may ask, what was the first war which the Jaintias they fought with the British? What would be the answer? In fact, for this, there's been a lot of, I will not say debate, but then a misreading somewhere down the line. Because many are of the opinion that the first war that the Jaintias fought against the British was in the year 1860. 1860, when taxes were imposed and all that. And then the second Anglo-Jaintia war was when Kananga came to the picture, 1862. But very, very few know that there was one very important war, which I call it the First Anglo-Jaintia War, that was fought in the year 1774. That war lasted for 5 days. Nobody talks about it. There's hardly any kind of reference to that war. But of course, you get it in my books. Just in case, if you want to read more about that. Let me just draw your attention to this war of 1774. Battle of Plassey? Our friends here? Young friends? Which year? Sorry? Very good. 1757. The granting of the Diwani, anyone? The granting of the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, anyone? I'll give it to you. Don't worry. 1765. Okay? Now, look into that. 1757, 1765. Now, that was a very important time when the company also got closer to the Jaintia people. Why am I saying this? It is because the Jaintia kingdom extended both in the hills and also in the plains. The Jaintia kingdom has 2 capitals. One capital was Nadia, which was the summer capital of the king. And the other was the Jaintipur, the winter capital of the king, which is presently Bangladesh. The Jaintias have lost their capital because people in Delhi in the time of partition 1947 did not really bother about it. We are still lamenting about it. Had it been that plains of portion of Sylhet was part of the Jaintias, maybe by this time we'd have a different story altogether. We could have got access even to the Chittagong port. Now this place is landlocked because that port has gone to East Pakistan then. But if the Jaintipur kingdom would have been reorganized when the partition was done, when the line was drawn, then perhaps things would have been a very different thing for all of us here in the Northeast. Anyway, let us not go into that. Now when the English came over to Bengal, and since the Jaintia kingdom had extended to that part, it was noticed that they wanted to have free trade concessions. But interestingly, the waterways from which the British they were carrying out their goods happened to fall within the Jaintia king's territory. So every time the English boats would move on that stretch, which enters the Jaintia king's territory, that time the ruler was Chhatra Singh, he decided that no matter how powerful you are, you cannot move into my territory without paying the taxes, just like any others, when they enter another kingdom. The British did not like it. They said, who are you to tell us that we have to pay tax to you? You're a petty little fellow, you don't know us. So therefore what happened next was, they flatly refused to pay the taxes on all the boats, the carriages, the goods, and the Jaintia king did not allow them to pass. Whether the Jaintia king was really aware of the power or the might of the British, that's a different story altogether. But then he thought that these people had no right to do that, being an independent king. So when he challenged them, the company merchants decided to complain to the authorities, telling them that their trade on limestone and other items from Khasi Hills now has been prevented. It can't go straight to Bengal because the Jaintia king is preventing it. So therefore, they wanted that there should be some kind of an intervention on the part of the government from Bengal, and the English merchants should be allowed, I quote, a free passage. There should not be any kind of interference in their trade and business. Further, they also said like this, that the Jaintia king, he would loot their contents whenever the boats they would ply. He would not only assert that they have to pay taxes, but loot the contents of the boat, and it caused endless delays and annoyance. Then they came out with another accusation, that the Jaintia king had committed incursions upon the lands from which the company was drawing its revenues from Bengal, where it had affected its returns. There were also major issues which eventually led to the armed conflict between the Jaintias and the English in the year 1774. But I will not really go into the details of that. I'll just highlight a bit here. Now, this Anglo-Jaintia War, which broke out in 1774, which I would prefer to call it as the first war that the Jaintias fought against the English, was mainly carried out on economic grounds. Now, the first trial of strength between the Jaintias and the English took place on the 24th of March 1774, when Captain Ellicott and his troops moved into a place called Rajagunj, a place which was only 6 miles from Jaintipur, the king's capital. The Jaintias, who were already aware of the intention of the British, put up a stiff resistance in the outskirts of Rajagunj and attacked the advance guard of Ellicott. When the troops got closer to Rajagunj, they found that the Jaintias had established themselves in a fortified position with trenches more formidable, which the company forces had not really anticipated. Ellicott's advance was checked for 2 days because of heavy rains, and the following morning, the Jaintia king Chhatra Singh sent a messenger telling Ellicott not to advance further until he was informed with the demands of the company. In the meantime, under the leadership of their own king Chhatra Singh, the Jaintias started to make additional preparations for any kind of attack by the company troops. On the 28th of March 1774, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a large number of Jaintia warriors came in herds of elephants and surrounded the sepoy camp. This is the first reference that we can get from the archives mentioning about a tribal king, a local ruler, using elephants to go for a war. I have not come across any others. Questions have been raised from time to time about the Jaintia kings. And because of that kind of monarchical status that the Jaintia king would portray himself, in many ways he was trying to copy the lifestyles of the Mughals. Bengal, under the Nawabs, under the Mughals. So therefore, he was kind of, like copying almost everything, right from his dress. He was not like any other traditional chief, okay, wearing those local dress. No, the Jaintia king would wear a dress just like the Mughals. His turban, his robe, his shoes, his throne, his house, the architectural design. Should you be interested in this, please visit my YouTube channel. Just type SN Lamare. You'll get it there. You'll see there about the traditional routes, the bridle path which the Jaintia king have used, and also the architectural styles and designs of the bridges that was made, which connects Nartiyam and Jaintipur. I never got a chance to go to Jaintipur, but I have a friend here, my research scholar. He has uploaded all those videos on YouTube. So, should you be interested, have a look at that. You'll get an idea about the Jaintia rulers. Now, as I've said, for the very first time, the Jaintia used elephants, and the English were attacked from every side. There was, of course, equal retaliation from the British troops, and this lasted for many hours. After a very long struggle, the troops, with their superior firepower, were able to disperse the Jaintias. And the Jaintias, as usual now, they had to move into the deep jungles. This 5 days war made the Jaintia king realize that the English were making much headway than expected, and that their war strategies was much more advanced than that of the Jaintias. In order to avoid sufferings to his subjects at Jaintipur, the king decided to move to another place called Borkhat. That was again another refuge what you call the palace, which is there in Borkat, is also in ruins. It is there in the YouTube channel. I've made a documentary on that too. And he was supervising the movements of his troops, and this continued. And on the 29th of March, 1774, Ellicott took possession of the place. And the whole of that country was now annexed. We keep on talking about annexation of Jaintia, 1835, but today I'm sharing this with you, that first annexation took place in the year 1774, and I'm giving you the date also, 29th of March. I think I should stop here. I said too much. I talked too much. If you have any questions, if you like any kind of clarification, I'm all here to look into that. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I just hope it was not really boring.